Welcome to the November 21st meeting of the Bismarck Board of Park Commissioners. I will call the meeting to order and ask Julie to please call the roll.
Commissioner Gilbertson.
Here.
Herzog.
Here.
Redmond.
Here.
Jeske.
Here.
President Zimmerman.
Here. Second item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. If we'd all stand, please, and join if you wish. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Third item of business is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gilbertson, second by Commissioner Redmond. Julie, if you'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Gilbertson.
Aye.
Herzog.
Yes.
Redmond.
Aye.
Jeske.
Aye.
President Zimmerman.
Aye. The next item on the agenda is our featured partner in programs. This evening, it's our pleasure to have the Bismarck Gymnastics Academy present, and their president of the Bismarck Gymnastics Academy, Jade DeSchmidt, will appear before the board. Good evening, Jade.
Hi. There we go. Hi, my name is Jade. I am currently serving as the president at the Bismarck Gymnastics Academy Board of Directors, so thank you for inviting us today to come give an update. Basically, gymnastics is what we do there, and we continue to see a high demand for gymnastics in our community. One of the biggest things we've been working on is being able to offer enough gymnastics to satisfy the demand that we have in our community. A couple of nice things that we've seen over the past few years is that we have an executive director and a director of our recreational program who are relatively new to their roles in the gym, but have shown really strong leadership and established the smoothest operations that I've seen in my time serving as a board member there. I've been on the board about 4 years now, and I think this is the strongest leadership we've seen in that time, which is really great. Our financial position also continues to be strong. We've still been able to offer gymnastics at what is one of the lowest costs for families that we see across the country, and I think that's a really, a really nice thing to be able to offer in our community, and tells a lot about the strength of our community. Our biggest challenge has been and continues to be the space we have available to offer gymnastics. Our team has been getting more and more creative and has been able to work in partnership with the team at Capital Racket and Fitness, which has been really nice. We've been able to outfit one of the racquetball courts there with some gymnastics equipment to be able to offer more classes. I believe this past summer and fall, we've been able to offer more classes than we ever have before, which is really nice, and those classes continue to fill. The facility we have right now was built about 35 years ago to house what was at the time a growing program and still continues to be a growing program. And that's, just our reality is that we just don't have the capacity to meet the current interest and demand from our community. So that's the biggest piece for us looking forward, is figuring out a way to get more kids in the gym. So.
Commissioner Gilbertson.
Jay, do you ever have to turn kids away?
We do.
Do you?
We often when our registrations open, they tend to fill very quickly on the days that they're open, and then the phone calls come afterward of, hey, can I get into class? Can we sneak you in? And we try to get as creative as we can, but we do know we're still turning families away.
Commissioner Jeske. Commissioner Jeske.
Thank you, President Zimmerman. So, Jade, what is the age range for the people who participate in your program? And then what is the max number of people you can have in your program?
So our age range, I believe our youngest athletes are about 18 months or able to walk, basically.
I'm signing up my granddaughter.
Yes, so we have parent participation classes that start at about 18 months and until kids are 3, and then they're able to go independently, and then all the way up through seniors in high school is our oldest ages that we serve right now. As far as the number that we're able to serve, I believe currently we have about 800 athletes in the recreational program, and we keep feeling like we are at the max, And then we've been able to find more ways to kind of sneak things in and add, where we can, and in the racquetball court and on the weekends and Sundays even. So we keep thinking it's the max, but maybe there's a little room for more.
And Jade, when you sit here in front of the park board, I mean, what would be your wish besides a new facility, and what else could we be doing to help you with your program?
Honestly, I think we've felt really good about the partnership that we've had, especially, Capital Racket and Fitness is the facility that we're attached to, so we're always close with them and feel like they've been very helpful with, helping us come up with some of these creative ideas, keeping our facility going, all of that kind of stuff. So I think in that aspect, we've been very pleased with that partnership. It's truly, the issue of space, which is, we're not the only ones,
Yeah, space is an issue.
It
for
is.
a lot of programs, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Jade, I have a couple questions. Do you look at other locations? I'm sure it's best to be in one spot, but do you look at, cooperate with the school district for use of gym space, or is that not feasible?
We have looked at a lot of different things. The gym spaces at the schools are also very busy with, varying activities. And one of the things for gymnastics is that once equipment is set up, it's not always quick to set it up and then tear it down and move it and store it and those kinds of things. So we have explored options and thought about going to other places. Unfortunately, a lot of time that indoor facilities are more available is during the summer, but that's also when we see the lowest demand, is because they're doing their outdoor activities during the summer. So,
Thank you. My other question deals with competition. Is there a sanctioned competition across North Dakota where there's other communities that have a similar program?
yes. So we house a USAG program in the gym, which is a national program through USA Gymnastics, which is the national governing body for gymnastics on the Olympic level. And we have athletes competing in what they call an XL program, which is designed to be a little bit less rigorous, and then a developmental program, which is designed to build toward a collegiate or an elite level athlete. We currently have athletes in both of those programs that compete within the state during the winter months, and then throughout the region and even up to national level competitions. We also work together with the public schools to house the high school programs for the state of North Dakota. So we have a high school team for Bismarck High, Legacy, and Century. Each have their own individual teams that train at Bismarck Gymnastics.
My last question, Jade, is are there participants from other communities? Do you draw, say, from the area, or is it basic Bismarck Mandan participants?
Basic Bismarck Mandan, as far as I know. We may see some that come from, nearby communities, but there's a gymnastics facility in Mandan and then also one in Bismarck, and I think most of our participants are coming from the Bismarck Mandan area.
Thank you.
Yep.
President.
Commissioners,
Go ahead, Paula.
Commissioner Redmond?
Thanks, President Zimmerman. Well, first of all, this is just a little bit freaky because history is repeating itself, because I still envision you flipping around in the Bismarck Gymnastics Academy area. So, but here you are. How many instructors do you hire? How many do you have on staff at one given time?
You know what? That's a really good question.
Okay.
I wish I knew the
That's
answer
okay.
to.
That's great. That's great.
I know we have a lot of staff because a lot of our staff are high school and college age students who are working part-time
Right.
and only work a few hours a week. We have 3 full-time staff members and then a lot of part-time staff
Absolutely.
members.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Jeske?
President Zimmerman, one last question. I know, like Aquastorm says, after the Olympics, they see a huge surge in people interested in the swimming program. Do you see that with gymnastics as well, given what the USA team did this year?
Yes, we do almost always tend to see a bump in interest after an Olympic year. And right now, especially with Simone Biles and her prominence and her fame in the sport, we see a lot of that. I do think one thing we would love to offer too is we no longer have a boys program for gymnastics, and that's a combination of space and staff and being able to offer that. But that was another, another area that got a lot of attention during the Olympics and more interest, and it's just not something we can offer right now.
Thank you, Jade.
Yeah.
Commissioners, other questions or comments for Jade? If not, Jade, thank you and best wishes
Thank
as
you.
the season progresses here.
Thank you
And
so
I would
much.
just add, make sure you take care of your father a little bit there.
I'll do my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item is disposition of bids. Our first one for consideration is the Eagle Parks Electrical Project. And John Klein from Apex Engineering has provided information regarding this project. John?
Good evening, President Zimmerman, Commissioners. Little history on the project. We were approached by Executive Director Kip Klipfel and his staff in the latter part of the summer to come up with electrical design for Phase 2 of the Eagles Park RV pedestal installation. And this entailed 5 more pedestals along the east loop of the campground. And during that process, we put together the plans and, excuse me, in middle to the end of last week, we submitted and opened bids. We had 3 bidders for the project. The qualifying low bidder was Edling Electric with a base bid of $67,300. That is over the top of our engineering budget that was done, or estimate that was done back in May. And reaching out to Edling and talking over with the gentleman that bid it, he didn't really notice anything out of line with the numbers that he got from his suppliers. It just seemed to be the progression of cost increases from back in May when we did the estimate till now. And then he also put escalations in there because the work won't be completed until next spring. So based on that and discussions with Executive Director Klipfel and his staff, it is our recommendation that the Park Board consider awarding the contract to Edling Electric in the amount of $67,300. Are there any questions?
Commissioners, any questions for John? Commissioner Jeske?
Thank you, President Zimmerman. And maybe this question, John, is more for Executive Director Klipfel. So given the fact that this is $17,300 over the estimate, where are we looking to pull that extra funding from?
President Zimmerman and Commissioners, Commissioner Jeske, 2 things. So we do have construction reserves that would be available to offset the cost of this project. But we've also reached out to the Eagles Club to see if they would be interested in helping out. And they were going to go back to their gaming committee that doesn't meet for a couple of weeks. But so we could have some potential to get some extra dollars from the Eagles Club also.
Okay. And back to you, John, one more question. Do you think there's value in waiting and rebidding this in the spring? Or do you think that costs are just going to continue to escalate, so we should just go with it now?
Commissioner Jeske, President Zimmerman, Commissioners, I do believe that if you wait till springtime, the prices are only going to go up. Everything that we're seeing in the projects that we've been watching being bid over the last few weeks, price escalations are just getting higher and higher.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
John, my question, what's the timeline for the project? If we approve of the bid for Edling, what are you looking at here for completion of it?
President Zimmerman, Commissioners, right now the substantial completion is scheduled for May 1st, and final completion would be May 15th. So the intent is the contractor be out of there before camping season starts.
I was wondering if we'd be out of there before camping season gets underway. I know a couple of the state parks had shut down camping to try to get in and do electrical work, so I was hoping we'd be on a schedule to get it done before camping season starts.
Yeah, and President Zimmerman, with the lead time, the contractor has all winter to go ahead and stockpile their materials. And then if it is awarded, they are obviously paid for that stored materials as long as it's in a stored facility with insurance. So they have the ability to procure the equipment ahead of time and have it available for installation first thing in the spring.
Thank you. Commissioners, other questions? If not, what are the wishes of the board?
I move to approve the estimate from Edling Electric in the amount of $67,300 for the Eagles Park RV pedestal installation project, or Phase 2.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Jeske, second by Commissioner Gilbertson. Any further discussion? Commissioner Herzog?
President Zimmerman, Executive Director Clipville, will you let us know after you talk with the Eagles Club, just kind of maybe where they were at with this as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Julie, if you'll call the roll.
Commissioner Gilbertson,
Aye.
Herzog,
Yes.
Redmond,
Aye.
Jeske,
Aye.
President Zimmerman.
Aye. The second item on, and thank you, John. Second item on disposition of bids is the Municipal Country Club. We have information in your memo, and we have Operations Director David Mayer to give us some information. Good evening, David.
Good evening, President Zimmerman, Commissioners. As you said, we quoted out for the beginning of October of 2025 a new lease agreement for the Bismarck Municipal Country Club. We put that out for bids and received one bid from the current lessee, which is Lady J's Catering. They certified that they would be able to meet all of the requests that we had listed in the specifications for the lease agreement, and staff's recommendation is to award to them.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Herzog.
Thanks, President Zimmerman. Dave, or we just put this in the newspaper for the open bid?
Yes, it's advertised.
Thank you.
Other questions? I'd have a question for David or our director. Just for public information, what's the term of the contract?
The term is 5 years.
5 years. And Lady J's, just for information as well, David or Kevin, how long have they, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know they've had it for a number of years. Is that Director Clipfell?
President Zimmerman and Commissioners, Ladies J's has been in there. This is at least their fourth 5-year
5
term,
years.
so I think it's approached over 20 years.
Thank you. Other questions from commissioners? If not, what is the wishes of the board?
President
Commissioner
Zimmerman,
Redmond?
I move that we award the bid to operate an on-site food service and off-site catering business at the Municipal Country Club to Lady J's Catering, Inc.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Redmond, second by Commissioner Jeske. Any further discussion? If not, Julie, if you'll call the roll, please.
May I just clarify that this also includes the agreement?
Yes.
Commissioner Gilbertson,
Aye.
Herzog,
Yes.
Redmond,
Aye.
Jeske,
Aye.
President Zimmerman.
Aye. Thank you, David. Next item of business is, item 6 on the agenda, is the City of Bismarck Flood Control Project update. And we have with us this evening City Engineer Gabe Schell, who will present some options to the board and the community. Good evening, Gabe.
Good evening, Chair, Commissioners. First of all, thank you for having me. As Chair Zimmerman said, my name is Gabe Schell, the City Engineer for the City of Bismarck. I spoke to you last in July of this year on this project. Since that time, just wanted to give you an update of what we've been up to, including the coordination we've had with your Executive Director and other staff, and kind of where we will go next after this. So the outline I have for you today, first a refresher so we're all familiar with what we're talking about. I'm familiar with it because I deal with this every single day, but I'm guessing you are maybe not as familiar, or the general public, on a day-to-day basis with this particular project. We'll work through our activity that we've done since July, and then we'll walk through the impacts that we would have on your property. And I put those in this order first, is avoidance. I mean, that's always the number one goal for any project that we have, is try to find ways to avoid those impacts. And if we have to impact, okay, how do we minimize that impact? And if we can't, once we've done that, how do we mitigate for that? So mitigation is the last thing that we try to do. So we always try to just avoid it if possible, or minimize, but at some point in time, we do have to then talk about mitigation. That's kind of one of the main cruxes of this conversation. And lastly, we'll talk next steps. So our refresher, this is our South Bismarck drainage ditch. The area in pink is the 2013 effective floodplain. The area circled in yellow, if I get my little highlighter out here, laser pointer we'll call it this time. This is the South Washington drainage structure that intercepts the South Bismarck drainage ditch. In the 2024 mapping update that FEMA performed in our community, the area east of that drainage ditch was included in the mapping update, and is then now therefore included in the 100-year floodplain from a Missouri River flood. So this is kind of the thing we're trying to avoid. This is what would happen in Bismarck if we did nothing during a flood. Obviously, in 2011, we did something, and we have had other flood protections in place since the 2011 flood, but none of those are recognized by FEMA as being certified, so therefore their risk map doesn't take those components into account. So the 950 or so structures within the new floodplain would be at risk of flooding, and then starting in, I guess, June of this year, have been required to purchase flood insurance if they have a federally backed mortgage. So not spending a lot of time on the history, because we just talked about this in July, but just wanted to maybe put a refresher out there for everyone. The project that we will be considering, or the option that we're considering the most seriously at this point in time, is the the Bismarck Expressway option. And this is two components. The first being this work that would be performed on the drainage ditch. So on the ditch itself, we would replace the structure on South Washington Street with a closure structure and a pump station attached to it. So when the flood occurs, we're able to close the gates and still pump rainwater out from the river, or excuse me, from the city's side and the storm sewer network over and into the river side during those gate closure events. We're also needing to upgrade our existing box culverts on South 3rd Street and Wachter Avenue to increase the conveyance and the ability for that ditch to move water. This drainage ditch is flat as flat can be. It's flatter than the Red River, and the Red River is very flat as well. So just as people try to get a perspective, there's not a lot of drop in this thing. We call it a ditch, but effectively it doesn't move a lot of water. So we have to do everything that we can to make that as efficient as possible. The other component of this project that would affect the park board more directly is the expressway component. But we will intercept a lot of the water that eventually makes its way to South Bismarck drainage ditch, and then allow that to convey out to the river through a different conduit, a new discharge into the river through a series of box culverts underneath the expressway that eventually would, as I said, discharge to the river. The pond that we're proposing on Park District property within Clem Kelly Fields there, that's in place in order to minimize or really just make the pump station work effectively. Without any storage on that pump station, it would need to pump every drop of water that falls as it's falling, as opposed to let some of that fall into the pump or into the pond and then pump that out under a more, I guess, reasonable time frame. From the pump station, that's kind of the last high ground that you would find at Clem Kelly. After that, you're in the floodplain. So the reason that it's located there and not closer to the river is because once you get past really where that box is today, you're in the floodplain at that point in time. There's additional requirements, and you're really having to build a levee structure at that point in time to keep that certified. So the activities that we've done since the last update, as I said, was in July of this year. Pretty much, I think it might have been the day after the board meeting, Kevin gave me a call and said, let's go sit down. So kudos to Kevin for initiating that. That was one of the key takeaways, is just additional engagement. Kevin brought along the Dakota Zoo executive director, and we met with our consulting team in early August, it would have been, to kind of just map out what are the options, what are the things that we should be exploring at this point in time. And then through that exercise, we gave direction to our consulting firm to give you the options that we'll be talking about here coming up, as ways to look at Clem Kelly and ways to fit this flood control improvement within the park property, and then look at what would need to change within that park property for all of this to still work in a cohesive manner. So I put that as the first bullet, but it's the first bullet that occurred, and it's really been occurring this entire time, even up through today, if you will. The next one I have on there, Senator Hoeven called a meeting from the federal perspective to talk about the FEMA investment in this project, brought along the FEMA Region 8 director from Denver and her staff, brought along representatives from our local legislative assembly, as well as then state and federal agencies to this meeting, just to kind of talk, make sure we're all on the same page about what this project is and what it means to our community. Your operations manager, Dave Mayer, was able to attend this as well. Through that discussion, we did talk about the FAA coordination that we're trying to know and have a better clearance or better understanding of what that bar that they want to set. Through those discussions, Senator Hoeven's office reached out to FAA, and then we got a similar answer of 12 to 18 months. It might end with a no at the end of this process. And also there might be up to $24 million that would have to get paid back to FAA if we select that option. So those are all the elements that we knew of. And it was, I guess, good news in the sense that we got the same answer when asked from a different perspective, that we didn't get a different answer when asked, when someone else asked. So there is a benefit in that, but unfortunately no direct or different answer that maybe made that option more clear for us to evaluate. As we moved into the fall, we've done geotechnical evaluations on both options, mostly as an environmental review and a desktop review at the South Bismarck drainage ditch and the airport property to better understand what the water table is like down there and what sort of mediation would we have to do if we put a pond on that airport property. And then we did put a geotechnical bores into the ground to understand the soil and the underlying soil conditions on park property as well as along Expressway to better understand that corridor. So to get a better handle on both of those, but definitely more evaluation on the Expressway option at this point in time. The last one I have on there is agency coordination. We kicked that off in October. The NEPA process, which is the National Environmental Policy Act, that all federal agencies are required to follow with their federal dollars, is being led by FEMA. So FEMA will be drafting the environmental document for this project as well as all the other projects that they are funding in their region. Once that document is done, they've indicated to us that we'll have an addendum to that will be more specific to our property and to our project. It will be our responsibility to provide them the information on the wetland impacts, the endangered species impacts, all the other impacts that might be out there. So this agency coordination meeting was held with those agencies at the state and federal level to better understand what those impacts might be. 6F would be one that would be of particular concern to you with the investment that the National Park Service has had on Clem-Kelly and Sertoma Park, that those impacts would have to be mitigated through the National Park Service for the 6F component. We did ask on 4F, which is another element that you may or may not be familiar with. The 4F impacts are associated only when federal highway or the DOT funds a particular improvement, and because there's no DOT federal money in this project, the 4F doesn't apply. But we were able to receive guidance from Fed Highway that was in attendance that even if 4F did apply, what we're talking about in terms of the mitigation that we would provide or the avoidance within Clem-Kelly would generally satisfy that 4F impact if, for whatever reason, federal highway dollars were added to this project at a later date. So it's interesting, the different perspectives. I think FEMA's real used to having to go into a park and maybe build a levee, and Fed Highway really never wants to build a road through a park. So they have just different rules and for their own reasons and different regulations that they have to follow. So now on to Clem-Kelly itself. I'm sure you're all familiar with your park, but I just tried to put this on the screen here because these are all the elements that are there today. And really this exercise that we went through and that we're continuing to go through is an evaluation of where do all these elements sit today and where could they be reformatted or repositioned so they would still function in that cohesive manner. But as you see on the screen, there's a collection of ball fields, 6 tennis courts, 2 pickleball outdoor workout, 2 separate parking areas, and a soccer field primarily are the components that we would constitute Clem-Kelly at this point in time. As we look into the options, this first option and really all the options with a 1 in front of them are kind of the same ilk. All of option 1s impact the 2 ball fields and then try to find a new spot for those 2 ball fields in the same location and all the options that we were working through. But then it comes to what else gets impacted when we move the ball field. So it's kind of a domino effect. When you move one thing, it might impact the next, and then where do you find a home for the next and the next and the next? And so the goal with all of these is to try to just lay out some options and see where which ones look the best, which ones pass the eye test for all of us to understand how this would look both now and during construction and then when it's done. I would note in the top left corner, it might be hard to read on the screen here, but all of these options that we're talking about at a bare minimum would replace the facilities at a 1-to-1 type ratio. That is the first commitment that we would make as a project. So if there's a restroom facility there that gets impacted, we'll put back a restroom facility. We don't have the details whether that's a 20 by 20 building or a 40 by 40 building, but we know there's enough room. We're still at a really high level with any of these concepts, so we haven't got into that detail. But at a minimum, it's a 1-to-1 type thing, as well as then parking. If there's a parking stall, you would look at any of these options that you will see. They will all have at least a net neutral parking number. Many of them are a couple of spots higher than what you might have today, but we didn't go through the exercise of telling you that it's 3 extra spots or 7 extra spots. It's probably minor in the grand detail of what we're talking about at this higher level planning stage, but would refine that as we get further along in this process. So more details on 1A here. As noted, get my thing back up here. So with the 2 ponds being constructed on these 2 ball fields, moving the ball fields to this location impacts tennis and the existing pickleball courts. So pickleball in this iteration was moved just off to the west of where it's currently located. We showed this, and this would be a theme that you'll see in all of these exhibits, is that one-to-one ratio is being what's proposed in the sense of just showing equal impacts, but we're also trying to provide where those opportunities are as well for either expansion of some of those facilities, either as part of the project or at a later date, or at least show where that room could be for that expansion to be. So we don't want to show 6 pickleball courts unless we plan on putting 6 in there, but just note that this is a spot that 6 could fit. That is probably part of then the negotiation, the discussion of what is the appropriate number of courts to have on there if this moves forward. And it might be 6 right out of the gate, but we just wanted to show this as kind of a one-to-one to start, and then that would be the basis for this discussion to continue. So with this one, pickleball located near where it is, the outdoor exercise equipment would be relocated to a similar type location. And then in this iteration, tennis is moved over to the current soccer fields as well as some additional parking placed in that facility. As we move to 1B, similar concept, ball fields in the same general location, parking in the same location, outdoor workspace, but as you'll notice here, the pickleball is moved away from this facility to move it closer to wherever the tennis courts will be. And in this iteration, this would require the acquisition of an adjacent piece of property. So that piece of property is currently for sale. There's not a building on it now, so we looked at all those as opportunities for us to potentially expand the park footprint if that's the best situation for all the parties involved. In this situation too, we show where 2 courts could be located for pickleball, but understanding that there's room there for a couple more if that was so desired. So 1A would not require the acquisition of any other property. That would all be within park district footprint. 1B as well as 1C, as you'll see here, would require the acquisition of some of the neighboring properties. So 1C and 1B, really the only difference between those is to recognize that there's another lot there as well. So we could draft up if that's a need for additional parking or if it's a need for additional court space. It's really up to the you as and the project to kind of come to a conclusion in that regard. We showed this here in case parking was a priority. We would want to note that the access to that would likely have to be through some of the commercial property to the east to get access to this, so it might not be the most conducive or easy thing to clean or maintain potentially, but just wanted to show that as a potential option. The next option, option 2, leaves your tennis courts, leaves pickleball, leaves outdoor recreation space alone, but then puts all those impacts into the ball field concept of really utilizing the orchard space, utilizing some of the soccer field, utilizing some of the existing parking lot to fit 6 fields on the easterly side of this complex. So this would obviously impact the mature trees that are there. The facilities that you have would be difficult to incorporate into this new layout, but it is a layout that at least showed that there's ways to do this without impacting the tennis facilities if that was a supreme priority. Would note that in some of those other options, there's also the concept of timing that we'd want to discuss a little bit too. If this does move forward, we would be able to kick off some of these elements earlier because we would be able to build the new tennis courts in the spot where the soccer field is before we potentially start building the flood control. So we would have the opportunity to start that mitigation process potentially before even the impacts occur, so that time at which the impacts are occurring is shortened and hopefully minimized or even eliminated if we're lucky on some of those activities that you have in these facilities. And you may have asked, that's great, all of these options, so the soccer field's being impacted, and where do those go? And really, it was through the discussions with Executive Director Klipfel to understand, are there any other properties that something like this could work that is not a burden to the park district? And this is what was identified because there just really isn't enough space at Clem Kelly to fit all those pieces in there and add one more thing. I mean, something has to go, and this was the thing that was probably the easiest to pick up and move in that sense. So this is Hidden Star Park adjacent to Cottonwood Park, where we would propose installing a new soccer field as well as the requisite number of parking stalls to support that soccer field, but note that there's additional room for expansion at this facility as well if Park Board desired in the future. So my last slide with pictures on it shows what will happen, or what is being proposed west of Clem Kelly as it makes its way through the land leased to the zoo. In coordination and conversations with Terry Lincoln at the Dakota Zoo, we feel comfortable with this concept as being workable from their perspective, as far as not being impactful to their current or future operations. So with this, regardless of what, let's say, this looks like, within Clem Kelly, the pond and the pond structure would remain in the same general area, and so this would be the conveyance ditch from the pond to the river that would be 8-10 feet deep or something along those lines from a slope down to the bottom of it. But the trail that's there today would be relocated closer to the fence line, or I guess to where the new fence line would be, further into the zoo property and further away from Bismarck Expressway. So your experience on that trail moving forward would be looking out over the ditch and then the expressway, as opposed to being closer to the expressway roadway itself. And then a box culvert crossing here at the tail end, providing connectivity to the pedestrian underpass on Expressway and the rest of the trail network that runs along the outside of the zoo, west of the zoo, and in between the river and the zoo. So with that, that's really all I had for the update. Take any questions that you have on all the stuff that I just threw at you. We're not asking for any actions from this board, but just really wanted to provide an opportunity for feedback so that we know if we are on the right direction. If there's any direction that you can provide, that would be beneficial. We're trying to use our time wisely. As I mentioned at the previous update, the FEMA grant that they gave to us for the first $50 million towards this project was granted in July of 2024, and they requested all those monies are spent by be July of 2027. So it's a long ways out, but not really when we think of how long it takes to do some of these things and design them and get them constructed. We definitely are feeling the pressure of making sure that we can fulfill that requirement that FEMA's put before us. So with that, I would take any questions you may have.
Well, Gabe, first of all, thank you for keeping the board updated. We appreciate you working with David and Director Klipfeld to work through these alternatives. I'm going to start with a couple questions, and certainly commissioners as well, if you don't mind taking some questions just to keep us up to date, knowing that things could change. One of the last slides you had was from the proposed ponds west along what I'll call the zoo property, the south end of the zoo. You say it's a ditch. Was there not some discussion of perhaps a box culvert or a covered structure to the river and not an open ditch? Is that still something to be discussed, or is it a ditch? If we would go with that plan, is it a ditch?
Commissioners, President Zimmerman, at this point in time, we are proposing a ditch there. As we're looking at, as we refined the preliminary planning design elements into a more refined version, we tried to look at elements that are going to be cost savers and elements that are going to be more expensive. So unfortunately, as we learn more about a project, generally speaking, we find more things that will be more expensive. So we look for ways to find cost savings measures, and one of them was that ditch scenario. If there's ways for us to convey that water in an open channel as opposed to having it inside a closed conduit, it operates A, more efficiently hydraulically, and B, at a significantly less cost to do so. So at this point in time, that is what we're proposing. We're trying to find ways to be able to maintain that ditch in a manner that's satisfactory to our public works team that will have to potentially clear that of debris from time to time, make it usable for the traveling public that wants to ride along that trail and have something decent to look at, and make it work for the zoo, your tenant at the zoo, to make sure that this is a beneficial thing from their perspective as well. So that we're trying to find that, but at this point in time, we would be proposing a ditch in that location.
Thank you, Gabe. My next question, back when you spoke of the FAA plan, I could not hear part of it. You said there was a $24 million payback consideration. What was the other consideration that, to me, doesn't make the FAA plan all that attractive?
Sure. President Zimmerman, Commissioners, the two primary components from the FAA's perspective are the clawback provisions that they have on previously invested dollars that they've put towards Bismarck Airport And that's an up to 24 million, so it doesn't give me a lot of clarity if that's a zero, because it could be a zero, or it could be the 24. It's a risk, and that's something that we're trying to understand better. The other component is a land use change that they would have to go through that would change their pond that the airport has, as well as the property that's adjacent to that. So it's not all pond right now. Some of that is just airport high ground, but all of it in the proposed plan would have been converted to a flood protection infrastructure piece. FAA, in our discussions with them and confirmed through Senator Hoven's outreach, would require a separate NEPA process for the land use change for that land from what could be FAA revenue generating from a lease on that high ground to then something that can't do that. So at a minimum, it's paying for the land, which I think is straightforward, but they might even not approve the land use change. And that to approve the land use change is the process that they say will take 12 to 18 months. Once they've seen the plans, that they're fully designed and they understand what the impacts are, then they'll say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't. So that's the element of risk that would run into our timeline of the FEMA grant potentially expiring before we would even hear back from FAA if that option is viable.
Thank you, Gabe. I see most commissioners have a light on, so I think we'll start at this end with Commissioner Gilbertson.
I'm okay for right now.
Okay, all right.
You hit on a couple of them there, so.
Commissioner Redmond.
Thank you, President Zimmerman. Appreciate that. Gabe, thank you so much. And I appreciate that walk back and the walk forward, so thank you for that. You said something that struck with me about previously invested dollars, and I'm thinking about that tennis court and the pickleball courts down there, and I probably want you to chime in a little bit here, if you could, Executive Director Clipfield. But I'm thinking about, and certainly do not want to throw a wrench in anything, but the question comes to my mind of taking the 2 softball fields away. Was there any discussion in the past few months of moving those softball fields to Cottonwood rather than at Clem Kelly? Because I remember saying replacing them, but could Cottonwood be a possible location rather than at Clem Kelly? Just a question.
Commissioner Redmond and Commissioners, yes, that could be a possibility. It wasn't when we looked in this scenario. We were looking for options to kind of keep Clem Kelly as is as best we could, and that was where keeping the softball in one location like that, really it tends to, from a management and the tournament aspect, works a little bit better. We do have softball diamonds at Clem Kelly or at Cottonwood, but these would be a little bit away from it. But it is an option that we can still consider.
Commissioner Jeske.
I've been promoted. Thank you, President Zimmerman. So Gabe, I do appreciate the fact that you have been working with the Park District on this, so that's important, that those lines of communication are open and that they're thoughtful. I will say I have some concerns about the ditch as well. I mean, I just think that that's a beautiful area that we have right now. That trail is highly used. I mean, I'm on it Saturday mornings, Sunday mornings. I think can we just think about the aesthetic value of how we're going to make that pleasing to people who are using that trail? So just a couple things there. And then I was playing tennis the other day, and I'll tell you, the tennis community is a little bit up in arms on all of this. I told them, don't worry, this is, we're going to get this all figured out. I think it's so important that if we're going to, in their minds, take something away, we need to give them something better than what they had before. Biggest concern for me, and I did ask Kevin to come up with some pros and cons for all the concepts, and I haven't had a chance to look at those give them a real deep dive. But the biggest thing too is the cost to the Park District. And I know you talked about special assessments. I know there's FEMA money out there, but the biggest thing is what is going to be the cost to the Park District on this? Because right now, we're all good. But I do think back to when we had the flood in 2010, and they asked us if they could put the trail, or they could put the flood protection area on our trail on Riverwood, and they said, don't worry, we'll put it back and it'll be perfect. And they did, but then they turned around and they special assessed us for it too. And that was one that really hurt. And I was talking with former Commissioner Mike Schwartz today. He was in my office. And, we talked about that, how that really stung. So something to think about, how do we make this so that the Park District is whole or even better than whole, and that, we're not getting stung for all of this. And the biggest thing is, and I'll say it again, I mean, I lived in Grand Forks. I moved there after the flood. It's horrible to experience a flood. I lived in Jamestown. Our house was flooded back in 1969. It's horrible. So we need to do what's right for the citizens, but, we have to think about a bigger and broader picture on that, too.
If I could address that one.
Go ahead, Gabe.
Commissioners, Commissioner Jeske, regarding the cost piece, I think I'll handle that one, would be the one I'd want to make sure we address. Obviously the Park District and the City of Bismarck have a unique relationship. If this was the City of Bismarck asking a privately owned piece of property for this thing, the expectation would be that we are buying this and we are paying for fair market value for that impact as well as the damages to the property, and that would be the process that we would use. Because of the relationship between the political subs, there's a desire to figure out efficiencies, not going through necessarily a process that we appraise the value of the park and compensate, and then assess you for the costs of the things that you just were compensated for. So I think to your point, I think there are opportunities here, if there is the ability to use Parks District property to make sure that value that's being contributed to the project is recognized of who is contributing it, and make sure that is carried forward in whatever the local share is that we as the City of Bismarck will have to pay, whether it's special assessments or whatever else it might be, to be able to fairly recognize that value that the board is providing.
Commissioner Herzog?
Yeah, thank you, President Zimmerman. A couple questions, Gabe, on options 1B and 1C, where the additional property would be purchased. Is it a shared use, or how's that snow cleaned between the two banks and Taco Bell and that whole situation?
Commissioners, President Zimmerman, Commissioner Herzog, I'm not exactly sure. We've had conversations with their listing agent. We've had conversations with one of the owners of the partnership that owns the property, just to understand, hey, are we barking up the wrong tree? Is this really not anything that they would be interested in doing? And thankfully, they're receptive to the conversation of what we're talking about. Both the listing agent and the owner were unaware of any, restrictions or deed restrictions or covenants that would preclude the use of a parking lot or a tennis facility or a pickleball facility on the property. We really didn't get into the discussion, though, of who's currently maintaining even some of the asphalt that's on that property that's for sale and how that came to be. So I think that would be something we'd have to explore further. There could be concepts if really you're just using the land for pickleball courts, and that's all without any other parking. There might be even a moot issue that you don't really care who's paying for the rest of that, as long as you're excluded from commercial association fees or whatever the mechanism that they are paying for the joint stuff today.
And we'd have to have it rezoned. Is it CG or something now? I assume?
We would have to look at that. I mean, generally speaking, we have most of the publicly owned property as a P public zoning district. We're going through a code rewrite that we'll talk about what that is, but the city also can own, or the park district can also own property that's CG in nature or egg land in nature. The park district owns or has owned egg land in the past as well as the city. So the fact that it's CG doesn't mean it needs to be rezoned to P public, as long as a pickleball court is a acceptable use on a CG lot, which I don't know if that's the case, but I can't imagine that is going to be a problem.
If I can continue, President Zimmerman, I think 1B would be tough to do without having the parking, like with option 1C, because just from my day job, I know people will park as absolutely close as humanly possible to those. So they're going to be parking in other people's lots, and I think that would maybe be problematic for 1B if that's the route we choose to go. But so either 1C or 1A, I think would be more usable. And then I think to a few other commissioners' points, as little downtime as humanly possible in the construction phasing portion of this would be important as well. And when that's taking place, obviously we've got McQuaid's softball tournament and other things, and it's going to be a delicate construction situation altogether. So I'm sure you'll keep us in the loop, and we'll have people, if we decide to go forward, as a part of your construction meetings, or if we could, weekly, or whenever you're doing them, would be great.
Commissioner Herzog, it would please me nothing more than to think about our weekly construction meetings. That means we have got this thing so far down that we're doing it. That's a great thought for me to have in the future.
Yeah.
Commissioner Gilbertson, I know that question.
I guess one question I would have is, in looking at 1A and 1C, President Zimmerman and Executive Director Clipville and Gabe, on the, the west side there, with the reconfiguration of the softball fields, is there any concern with the like the distance and the closeness of the trail and the outfield fence and such there?
Commissioners, President Zimmerman, Commissioner Gilbertson, we've looked at all of those. Every scenario probably has, you know, some of those components to it. Right now, we have softball fields that softball players that can hit softballs onto Expressway Avenue. We do have them hit from field to field. Sometimes they're into parking lots, but every different design is going to have some of those components that we're going to have to be aware of. And we've looked at and thought about options. Do we try to make the fences higher? What ways can we mitigate those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen softballs land on top of staples at the time, and the Elks Lot. I mean, it's amazing how far that they can go. And it's just part of it. And you know, and to Commissioner Herzog's point that with that parking, you know, I mean, I've lived in Bismarck my whole life, and I've often wondered what that. I mean, that has been no man's land there for, and I would submit, I don't think anybody maintains that asphalt in the driving through there. Like, it's crazy, but I mean, that people do need to park as close as they can. But I mean, I like these plans, and I like the idea of the mitigation, some of the mitigation before the actual taking away. I think that would go a long ways with our user groups, and now that this, you know, these are out there and whatever, and to bring the user groups to the table, I think is going to be a good thing. Thank you.
Commissioner Redmond?
That was my question. Thank you, President Zimmerman, is to the executive directors. What are the plans on bringing those user groups together? Tennis, as Commissioner Jeske mentioned, but also pickleball and men's and women's softball and things like that. So what's the process of working with the community as part of our mission and vision to move forward?
President Zimmerman, Commissioners, Commissioner Redmond, that's a great question. I've already started to reach out to some of those groups that have called me and asked about what's going on and how are we down in the process. I've talked to Gabe Shell. We've looked at some tentative dates in early to mid-December to try to have a meeting and get all those user groups in a room, look at these concepts and get their feedback, get their feeling on what are the positives to each proposal and what are the negatives to going that route, and trying to get a consensus that, you know, if one of the options is better than the others. And so that would be our next step, is to schedule that meeting and then get that set up with those user groups.
Gabe, again, I want to thank you for working with our Director Clipville, and David, I know, has been involved in a number of the meetings as well, and I certainly appreciate that, as I'm sure the whole board does. And I know tonight we have a lot of folks watching from the community. Again, I know you realize, or I realize you don't know the exact timeline, but for my benefit and perhaps other folks, a general timeline. We're not talking summer of '25. We're going to be down at Clem Kelly tearing up softball. Can you give us a general idea?
If anyone's digging up Clem Kelly softball field, it's not associated with this project. So in 2025 anyway, I can guarantee you that. We'd be looking at 2026 would be the first year that we would be able to do really anything significant, and that might just be some of the pre-work, some of the sourcing of the materials, and really we would anticipate this being more of a heavy hit in 27 and into 28 is when we anticipate most of the construction activities occurring on the project itself.
Commissioner Herzog?
Thanks, President Zimmerman. One other quick question. The community orchard replacement, or, you know, if they could be invited to that meeting would be great too. If FEMA could sell us some cherry trees and
Executive Director
raspberry bush.
Clipville?
Yes. President Zimmerman, Commissioners, Commissioner Herzog, Dave and I have also looked at options for that, and that isn't part of this plan, but something we're trying to do more internally with our staff. But yes, that would be another opportunity that we would want to take advantage of.
Again, Gabe, thank you for keeping the board informed, and we know you'll work with our staff, and hopefully we'll see you back with some updates.
Yep, thank you very much, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks.
Commissioners, our item 7 on the agenda is the consent agenda. A variety of items have been placed in a consent agenda. The consent agenda can be approved with one motion, or an item or items can be removed for additional discussion and separate action. Staff recommends approval of the following items: consideration of the October 17th, 2024 board meeting minutes, consideration of 2025 matching grant application, consideration of professional consultant list for 2025 and 2026, request board authorization to call for the 2025 fertilizer bids, appointment of Elise Pucklich to the BSC Aquatic and Wellness Center Advisory Committee, consideration of change orders for the Trail Cultural Resource Studies, and consideration of accounting policy and procedure handbook changes. Any discussion from commissioners or questions? Commissioner Jeske?
Thank you, President Zimmerman. I would like to see us just pull back the consideration of the 2025 matching grant application. I have a question for consideration.
Okay, we can pull that one. Any other requests to pull out items for separate consideration? If not, is there a motion to move forward with the consent agenda on all items with the exception of the consideration of the 2025 matching grant application?
I'd move to approve the consent agenda minus the item pulled for discussion.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Herzog, second by Commissioner Redmond. Any further discussion? If not, Julie, if you'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Gilbertson,
Aye.
Herzog,
Yes.
Redmond,
Aye.
Jeske,
Aye.
President Zimmerman.
Aye. Then we'll look at consideration of the 2025 matching grant application. The proposed application is included for your review. Commissioner Jeske?
You know, I've looked at this for probably 14 years now, and it really hasn't struck me. As today I was just going through the purpose statement, and the last thing is the project completion. And then one thing it says is the approved projects must be completed in the year they are awarded, otherwise BPRD funding will be lost. You know, our last set of grants, we do 2 sets. First set in February, and round 2 is in June, which probably means it comes to July board meeting for approval. I'm thinking most of the projects probably cannot be completed within that year because they're given 5 months. And I don't know if it's just something that needs to be reworded. I did talk with Executive Director Clipful today on this one. You know, I don't know if we need to wordsmith that a little bit differently. I'm open to suggestions, and Kevin, like I said, we had a conversation today, so.
I'm going to ask Mike Wall to step up here. I know I've had that question. I've had that question in the past as well. So, Mike, can you provide us some background here?
President Zimmerman and Commissioners, yes, most of the projects do get completed in that timeline by the end of the year. There are some, such as the electrical panels at Eagles Park, that carry over, but those funds aren't, as far as I know, aren't lost or have never been lost for a project extending that way. We work as best we can with the user groups and myself overseeing the matching grant project to get those projects done by the end of the year.
And I can fully understand why you'd want to, you know, have this contained within the fiscal year as opposed to having it run over. But is it appropriate to say that they must be completed? I mean, is it something that the project must be started within the fiscal year and completed within the following year? I don't know. And maybe it's just fine the way it is, but it kind of begs the question to me.
President Zimmerman, Commissioners, Commissioner Jeske, I guess we could take, we can take a look at that and rewording that. And I know that bringing this to the board at this board meeting is so that we're prepared for the 2025 matching grants and have the application ready for individuals that want that, matching grant.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to turn to Executive Director Klipfel.
President Zimmerman and Commissioners, Commissioner Jeske, I think one thing to consider is we try to get all these user groups to come to us with projects so that we're aware of them, so that we can vet them before, so that we make sure that they fit our mission and our vision, and they're part of our, going to fit in our matching grant program. And I would say any construction type projects that we need to get done in the fiscal year, we try to get those folks to apply in February. And sometimes some of those smaller ones, we may say, hey, there's enough time, maybe you're not ready, or you can wait until June, and depending on timing, that works a little bit better. But like Mike said, we've never, in my time, have never taken any funding away because somebody didn't get it done because they couldn't complete it because of some construction constraints and things like that, so.
I just think about the slackline people that came to our matching grant. It was years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, probably pre-COVID. They were awarded like a $10,000 grant, and then nothing ever came to fruition of that. But I think they raised some money, if I'm not mistaken. So just kind of, I was just thinking about them and the history there. But maybe it doesn't need to be changed, but it's just begs the question.
Well, yeah.
Commissioner Gilbertson.
President Zimmerman, I mean, I've been sitting here trying to think of the word, but I mean, approved projects must be completed in the year they are completed. Otherwise, BPR funding will be lost. I mean, something to the effect of unless the words are escaping me right now, but something in there with approval of the park district or whatever. I mean, I think that something like that would be easy to add. That gives, loophole isn't the right word, but some wiggle room.
Yeah, it gives a little wiggle room for
Wiggle
people.
room.
So.
Mike, any thoughts, or Director Klipfel? Can we change some language here?
President Zimmerman and Commissioners, we can look at that and take your suggestions and come back with some language that would fit what you're trying to purvey.
Thank you. So at this point, we would leave this item in abeyance. This item on a consent agenda, just leave it off. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, the last item on the agenda is approval of bills.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Gilbertson, second by Commissioner Herzog for approval of bills.
Commissioner Jeske.
Commissioner Jeske. Yeah. Julie, if you'll call the roll, please.
Commissioner Gilbertson,
Aye.
Herzog,
Yes.
Redmond,
Aye.
Jeske,
Aye.
President Zimmerman.
Aye. This concludes our meeting. The next regular scheduled board meeting is December 19th, 2024, at 5:15 in the fabulous Tom Baker meeting room. But before I adjourn, I want to just say to the public, we had a staff recognition appreciation luncheon this past week, and publicly, on behalf of the Board of Park Commissioners, we want to thank all of our employees, all of our staff, full-time, part-time, for another great year of programming and maintenance of facilities. So thank you, each and every one. Meeting adjourned.